Passion is the fuel that drives any successful podcast. And on today's episode of Good Podcasting, we're going to talk about it. Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Good Podcasting. My name's Brian. I'm the host of the show. And on this podcast, we really talk about everything that's going to help you be a successful podcaster. And when I say successful podcaster, I mean that you are able to set out and do the things that you want to do as a podcaster. You achieve the goals that you want to achieve. And that may not be monetarily, that may not be hundreds of thousands of listeners, but maybe it's just to communicate the thing that you want to communicate, to have an audience and a community that comes around that thing. But that thing that you want to communicate, whatever that thing is, has to be driven by your passion. It has to be something that you are passionate about, because passion is the fuel that drives any successful podcast. It's the thing that keeps you motivated during late night editing sessions. It's that thing that fuels your creativity when you're brainstorming new episodes and the content that you want to put out there. And it's the thing, your passion is the thing that resonates with your audience. So today I want to talk a little bit about why passion is so important in podcasting. I already gave you a few ideas, but I want to break it down a little bit more. First of all, your passion breeds authenticity. When you're genuinely passionate about your topic, it really does shine through in your voice. It shines through in your storytelling and your enthusiasm for that topic. You know, when I first started podcasting, my co-host and I, we would give our guests, we'd have a guest on and we would give them the spiel, and Chase and I would always look at each other and go, are you going to give the spiel today, or am I going to give the spiel today? And that spiel had a lot of things, but it included smile when you talk, because our listeners can hear your smile through the microphone. And that was our simple way of saying, be happy, be excited. We invited you on to talk about the thing that you're passionate about, and we want our listeners to feel that passion come through the microphone. So be happy, smile as you talk. People can sense that. Your passion resonates with your audience because it's the thing that breeds authenticity and really is the starting point for community when your audience is listening and knows that the things that you're talking about aren't just things that you're just throwing out there. They're things that come from a place inside of you that you're really passionate about. It builds trust, it builds connection, and it builds community. So if nothing else, that's a good enough reason to roll with your passion. Now, let me back up for just a second and talk about where this particular episode is coming from. You see, I've worked with a number of podcasters, a lot of podcasters, in fact, that have called me up or emailed me. We've got on Zoom calls. We've sat down face-to-face over coffee. And I wouldn't even say podcasters yet, people who are thinking about podcasting. And they say, I want to start a podcast, but I'm not sure what I want to talk about. And so we start there, and I start digging in. What are the things that you're excited about? What are the things that motivate you? What are the things that drive you? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you love talking about? What are the things that you love learning about? And if you can't answer any of those questions, number one, you probably shouldn't start a podcast about anything yet until you discover the thing that you're incredibly passionate about and something that you can talk about forever. Because your podcast it may only be 5 minutes, but it's 5 minutes this week, it's 5 minutes next week, it's 5 minutes the week after that. You may expand to 15 minutes, to 20 minutes. So as you consider starting a podcast, again, something that you're passionate about, because it breeds the authenticity that your audience craves from you as a podcast host. So let's move on to the second reason we're talking about passion today, is that passion fuels consistency. You see, I kind of already mentioned this a little bit. Is it 5 minutes this week, 5 minutes next week, 5 minutes the week after? Podcasting is a long game, and consistency is key to creating your content, and consistency is key even to building your audience. Because We've talked about this in other episodes of Good Podcasting, on other videos here on this channel at Summit City Studios, is podcast listeners are loyal listeners. So if you're listening to this podcast, thank you, first of all. But secondly, if you're listening to this podcast, you know that this particular episode is not dropping on my regular drop day, my regular release day. And that's because I've had some other things happening this week. I released a video on this channel that wasn't a Good Podcasting video, so I had to postpone this one for a day. But consistency is key to building an audience, because podcast listeners, audio listeners specifically, are loyal listeners. If they know your podcast is coming out on a particular day, they're going to download it because they've subscribed to it, and they're going to listen to it that day when it comes out, or the next day when it comes out, because it becomes part of their routine. And if you're not passionate about what you're doing, there's going to be gaps in your release schedule, and you really need to stay consistent, especially early on as you are creating your podcast, to build in a rhythm. And if you're not passionate about the topic that you're talking about, that rhythm is really hard to create. So your passion fuels your consistency, but it also drives your creativity. You see, when you're deeply passionate about something, a subject, you're more likely to throw yourself into it, to learn more about it, to explore it, to look at it from different angles, different sides, to do some deeper research as you really dig in to understand your topic. If it's something that you're passionate about learning about, something you're passionate about talking about, your audience is going to pick up on that. And so you're going to be more creative in how you deliver your content, because you're always learning something new about it, or you are maybe bringing a different angle. You're looking at a subject from a different perspective than maybe your audience has ever seen or heard before. And so the more passionate you are about a subject, the more creative likely you're going to be in creating your content. So the big question is, how do you identify your passion? And that can be a harder question than it sounds. Again, I mentioned earlier, I've talked to so many podcasters or people who want to start podcasts who don't really know what drives them, who don't really know what they're passionate about. So to help identify something that they're going to talk about, a subject for their podcast, it's really difficult. So a lot of people, I can't tell you how many people just this week that I've heard say, I'm going to start a podcast. When I ask them what it's about, they say, well, I like to talk about politics. I like to do some woodworking. I like to do this, and I like to talk about that, and some sports. The Super Bowl just happened, and they're all over the place. And I'm not trying to come down on anyone. I'm trying to encourage you to find one of those things, at least to start with. Pick one of those things that you're passionate about and roll with it. Because if I'm talking about sports one day because I'm passionate about that, and then I'm talking about politics one day because I'm passionate about that, which I'm not, by the way, and the next week I'm talking about fish for some odd reason, my listeners are going to go, what am I tuning in for? Like, I tuned into episode 1 because it was about sports, and I thought that's what this podcast was going to be about. But then we're talking about this, and we're talking about that, and your listeners are going to fall off. So find the thing that you're passionate about, and that starts with self-reflection. Ask yourself some deep questions. Ask yourself some hard questions. What topics or issues you find yourself consistently thinking about or gravitating towards? What's the thing that keeps you up at night? What's the thing that you think about first thing in the morning when you wake up, when you're sitting at your desk at work? What's the thing that your mind drifts off to? Maybe those are some of the things that you need to be considering as topics and subjects for your podcast. Because look, your topic needs to be really specific. It needs to be really niche. We talk about this in video content creation as well as audio podcast creation, is you need to niche down, at least to start with. There are channels that talk about anything and everything. And a lot of podcasters want to be like that. But the thing you don't realize when you start out and you just listen to things like the Joe Rogan Experience, who he interviews people from all walks of life and talks about all sorts of things. Joe Rogan had made a name for himself already. People knew who he was. People knew what he was about. And when people tuned in, they tuned in because they knew him, they knew his name, and they knew his personality. And so he could do whatever he wanted with that show, and people were going to watch. I hate to break it to you. People don't know you like they know Joe Rogan. People don't know me like they know Joe Rogan. So for people like you and I who don't have a name that's in the media every day for whatever reason, good or bad, we really have to niche down, because people aren't going to tune in because they like us and they like our personality and they know our name, at least not to start with. So we need to find something that we're passionate about and narrow it down to a topic that we can talk about that's going to engage that audience. And as that audience grows, then we can consider branching out into some other topics and exploring some other niches. But when we start out, we need to niche down. Now, it is kind of counterintuitive. I get that, because we think the more narrow our focus, the smaller our audience is. If it's not a popular topic, if it's not a trending topic, people aren't probably going to tune in and listen. But listen, if it's something that you're passionate about, I guarantee there are other people that are passionate about the same thing you are. They're asking the same questions you are, and they're looking for the same content that either you're looking for or that you are creating. So niche down, be as focused as you can. The key to this is to find your people, find your audience, find your tribe, people that share your passion and share your enthusiasm, and begin to build your community around that. Now, let me share a couple of stories that happened also just this week. I shared a little bit ago that I've talked to so many podcasters, even this week, that weren't sure about what their podcast was going to be about. They were kind of all over the place. But I talked to 3 in particular who were excited about the very thing that they wanted to talk about. They were so laser focused. They knew exactly what they wanted to communicate. They knew exactly how they wanted to communicate it, but they just didn't know how to do it. Like what equipment they needed, how to set it up, how to press record, how to edit. They're chomping at the bit to get going. And because their passion, you could hear it in their voice, you could see it in their face. I could hear it over the phone in the way that they got emotional as they talked about this thing that they were passionate about. 2 of them were very similar, from different walks of life, different cities, but their content was very similar, and it was something that was coming from inside of them that they wanted to see change in the world around them. Another one was just a passion about a sport that he loved and that he wanted to really dive into, and to communicate something about that sport from a different angle maybe than most other people were doing it on podcasts or here on YouTube. So for as many people as aren't sure what they want to talk about because they're not sure what they're passionate about, there are just as many people who have a driving passion that I'm really excited to work with and want to help them get started with their podcast. So what about for you? What's the thing that you are most passionate about? What excites you? What keeps you up at night? What are the things that cause you to be curious and ask all sorts of questions? Find that thing and start there as you consider how to create and launch your podcast, because your passion is the thing that's going to drive your creativity. It's going to fuel your consistency, and it's going to be the thing that builds authenticity and community with you and your audience. Now it's time for a segment we call Good Questions. Now these questions are sent in from listeners like you via email. Some of these questions I get on Instagram, some come in the comments of these videos, and some are just come from conversations I have with potential clients as we talk on the phone, on Zoom calls, or sitting across the table having lunch with one another. This particular question came via email. It's someone who has been exploring. They've been on YouTube for a while. They also do a podcast separately from YouTube. And the question is, what's up with YouTube podcasts? You ever wonder that? YouTube has a podcast tab now. What is that? What is it all about? Well, I would spend a few minutes right here and now talking to you about what's up with YouTube podcasts. But I actually just released a video on YouTube podcasts and why your podcast should be on YouTube, and maybe a few reasons why you should not put your podcast on YouTube. So if you're interested in the answer to that question, I'll put a link. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put a link in the card above. I'll put a link in the description below. It'll be at the end of this video. So check that out if you're interested in learning what's up with YouTube podcasts. That's it for today. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Good Podcasting. I hope you learned something new. And if you have questions to submit for Good Questions segments of this show, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to see them. I'd love to read them. I'd love to try and answer them. Leave me a note in the comments below. Send me an email to info@summitcitystudios.com or find me on Instagram at Summit City Studios. And I'll talk to you in the next episode.